The 1940s were kind of an enigma for baseball card collectors. Back in the 1930s, you had a ton of iconic sets. You had releases every single year. You had a bunch of superstars, but jumping into the 40s, card production was way down. A lot of companies were anticipating the start of World War II, and a lot of the best players, like Bob Feller and Ted Williams, served for the United States and fighting overseas. So you didn't really have as much US based released cards, and iconic brands like Gaudi faded away. So this video, we're going to be covering the top 50 most expensive cards within the 1940s. And what you'll find very interesting is there are a ton of foreign issues based around this decade, where as some of the other videos that we have made, there isn't as much. So this video did take a ton of time to research, so I do hope you guys enjoy it. And let's take a look at some of the most expensive cards throughout the 1940s. All right, let's jump right into it. So some rules to this video. I included regional and foreign issues. Often you'll see these lists out here, most valuable cards per decade, and they ignore those because they're quote unquote rare. I find that lazy, so I try to include that in these videos. Also, I limit cards to 2 per set. Otherwise, one set tends to dominate within a decade. For example, if I covered 1949 Leaf cards, they would have a lot in this video. Same with like 1949 Bowman. So again, 2 per set on that side of things. Also, since we are talking about a lot of rare cards in this video, there's very few comps for a lot of these. Sometimes they sell every 2 or 3 years. So the market price will be higher than what is shown within this video. Markets change quite a lot. I mean, if you look back at rare cards 5 or 10 years ago, they seem very cheap in comparison to what they do today at auction. This is very common also with non-sports cards. So if you ever want to dive into the non-sports card side of things, tons of videos on the channel covering that, as well as a decade series like this. Also, we did not include every single variation that there are out there, as well as every variation isn't even documented. Looking at the Leaf side of things, right, there's a ton of different types of printing variations, and then there's a few others over here listed on the variation side of things. So with that out of the way, I think we are ready to start off this video. We're going to start off also by year. So the other baseball videos we tend to do by value because it's easier to chart. With very limited comps, at least on half of the cards shown to you guys today. We're just going to be going by year. Apologize, it's not in any specific order. 1940 play ball. This is of Joe DiMaggio. The highest graded out there is going to be a PSA 9. The most expensive sale is actually back in 2007. Man, you're almost at 20 years now since that card is sold, and it went for $34,000. Now, based off of today's market, I think if that 9 did go to auction, you're easily looking at $250,000 plus. Just to give you some context and some other values of this card, typically if you find a 1 to a 3, you're paying anywhere from like $700 to $1,400. 7 sells close to $15,000. The other card, and you'll see this in sets that they both are in, is Ted Williams. And the highest out there is a PSA 10. With that 10, it sold for $60,000 back all the way in 2006. Some other values for you. PSA 2 is about $900. A 4 is about $1,800, and an 8 sells for $8,000. Up next, we have a 1941 double play, DiMaggio and Charlie Keller. Highest out there is a PSA 8.5, and that actually sold for $10,000 back in 2021. I kind of find that a little cheap, although a lot of people despise this set. Sometimes also you'll see these cut as individual panels. I don't believe the grading companies grade those individual panels. Maybe CGC does. But yeah, I've seen those out in the wild before. Other values, a 2 is about $400. A 3 is about $500. A 7 is $1,800. Here's another one with Pee Wee Reese and Kirby Higg. I believe this is one of the earliest Pee Wee Reese cards. The highest graded out there is a 9, and that sold for $7,500 back in 2020. 1 you can find under $100. A 3 is about $200, and a 6 is about $600. All right, 1941 Gaudi we have here of Carl Hubble. You can actually find these in 4 different colors out there. These also have plain backs. I believe one of the cards in the set also alluded to war that was happening really soon. The highest graded of this over here is a PSA 7. The most expensive sale is $1,100. Back in 2005 for that 7. Unauthentic on this card is about $300. A 2.5 also sold for $262 back in 2022. A 5 sold for $240, but that is all the way back in 2020. These don't sell that often. I don't see them that often at card shows as well. They tend to be one of the toughest Scouty releases out there. And actually, a lot of people don't even know that these exist. I understand from most collectors, they know about 33, 34. They probably know about the heads up and 38. But a lot of those other years, people don't really know as well. 41, I find, is one of those sets that people rarely bring up. Another one over here of Mel Ott. The highest graded is a PSA 8 that sold for 2.4K back in 2019. Some other values, a 2 sold for under $100 in 2018. A 3.5 has sold for about $700, and a 5 in 2019 sold for $255. Again, another showing of that these don't sell that often. The market rate is going to be completely different than what these comps show you right over here. A 1941 play ball, we have another Ted Williams over here. His 3-card run for play ball was pretty legendary. Highest graded is a 9, and that sold for $192,000 back in 2022. Give you some other values. A 2 is about $1,000. A 4 is about $2,000. I've had both of these grades before, and they are so liquid. This card individually. 8 sells for about $23K. And no surprise, we have Joe DiMaggio once again. The highest graded over here was $750,000 back in 2020 for a PSA 10. Incredible. A 2 is about $2K, a 4 is about $3K, and a 5 is about $5,000. All right, we're going to jump into 1943. So La Campana. This is of Martin Dihigo. And the most expensive sale on this one is 4.4K. I don't believe that there are any that are graded. Steven put together some of these slides, so that's why he had it highest graded for raw. Very, very limited sales, a very tough card to find. Up next, we jump into 1945. So again, the Warriors, you don't see too much out here. Here's another Martin Dihigo. Highest graded on this one is a PSA 4, with the most expensive sale being 2.9K for a 2. A 1 sells for about 1.3K. These cards are out of Cuba. I've seen these occasionally. They aren't the toughest Latin American cards to find, but they are tough. You will not find these at most shows. In fact, if you walk around the National, you may only see 1 or 2 of these out there. Mini Minozo is going to be the other one in this set that we're going to be featuring. There's a lot of other names to look into, though. What I will tell you that. Highest graded on the Minozo is a 4. The most expensive sale is 2.1K for an SGC2. PSA 1 about 1.6K, or 1.5 is about $2,000. 46 Propaganda Montiel of Martin Dihigo. The highest grade out there is a PSA 30. I will say these are paper thin cards. Typically you'll find these with ones, some holes or rips. Like, they are super, super condition sensitive. Probably the most condition sensitive cards that I've ever come across. The most expensive sales, a 2.5 that sold for almost $10,000. Some other values to give you guys. PSA 1 is about $4,000. A 1.5 sold for 1.8K in 2023. That seems like it was a very, very cheap sale. A lot of the time I see these going for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. The other card in this set, the Stan Musial. I used to want this card, but I can't afford it now. The highest graded is a PSA 3, with the most expensive sale, 2.5, selling for $30,000 in 2021. A 1 now typically sells for about $5,000. A 2 is about $8,000. A lot of these have hit the market within the last year or so. I think these do have room to go up a little bit more, just based off of how good Stan Musial was. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. 1946, Deportivo of Buck O'Neill. The highest grade out there is a 2, with the most expensive sale being $3,300. Some other values, SGC 1.5 sells for about $2,000. These are much tougher than the 45s I showed you a little bit earlier. These I barely see for sale, so if you have an opportunity to buy a Buck O'Neill or the next player you'll see, grab them. Also should mention there is a Minozo in that set too. It's very expensive. All right, so Dandridge right now. His cards throughout the 40s, but the highest grade on this one is a 4. The most expensive sale was a 3 that sold for 1.8K. A 1 has also sells for about 1.3K. All right, we're jumping into 1946. Another Martin Dihigo. The highest graded on this card is an authentic. If I remember correctly, these are hand cut, and this one over here sold for 4.5K. Another one over here of Buck O'Neill. This is a PSA 1, so maybe these aren't hand cut. And the Buck O'Neill sold for $6,000. Up next, we have a 1946 Parade Sportive of Jackie Robinson. Highest graded on this is an SGC 6, with the highest sale being 11.7K for SGC 4 or 5. Authentic has sold for $4,000. A 2 is sold for $11,000. I believe there was one that sold at Heritage also. Maybe that was the 2 or something like that. I saw it recently, probably close to $10,000. All right, we have another Martin Dihigo card. Highest grade out here is a raw. And the most expensive sale, this was $1,000 back in 2022. 1946 Campo of Martin Dihigo, highest grade out there, 1.5. Couldn't find any sales based around this card. 1947 photos, postcards of Martin Dihigo. The highest grade out there is an SJC3, and that sold for close to $8,000 back in 2023. 1947 Tip Top Bread of Yogi Berra. The highest grade out here is a PSA 7, which that sold for about $8,000. But to give you other context, SJC1 right now sells for about 1.5K, a 4.5 sold for 3.8K, and a 6 sold for about 7.5K. I don't think you can find this card under $2,000 today. Another card in this set that's awesome is the Warren Spahn. And these are also both before the 1948 Bowman, and they are US-based releases as well. So everyone always talks about, oh, the 48 Bowman is the first card for each of these. No, they're not. Regardless, the Warren Spahn, the highest out there is a PSA 4. The most expensive sale was $5,000 back in 2023 for a 4. 2 is 1.5K. 1947 Sports Exchange of Yogi Berra. These are hand cut. The highest graded is a PSA 9, and that sold for $1,000. Where an 8 has also sold for $888 back in 2019. I think those prices are a little bit low in comparison to what they would do today. Another Sports Exchange of Stan Musial. The highest out there is a 9. That 9 sold for 3.3K in 2023. 4 sells for 1.8K, and a 7 sold for 1.1 in 2021. 1947 Bond Bread. Be careful with these cards. There's some that have like a full border that go all the way over here, and then there's the ones that have rounded. I believe the rounded ones were actually put into bread. The ones over here are either counterfeit or they're printed a little bit later. So if you see these cards, stick with the ones with the rounded corners like that. Highest grade on this card is SGC 9. The most expensive sale was 3.6K for an SGC 7. Some other values, authentic sales are about $350. 5 sold for $733. Jackie Robinson is also in that set. Highest out there is a 7.5. That 7.5 sold for $23,000. Other values, 1 is about $2,000, 2.5 about $5,000, and a 7 about $8,000. A 1947 Bond Bread Jackie Robinson portrait. This is a super iconic card of Jackie, quite expensive. The highest out there is an 8.5. A 7 sold for $42,000. A 1.5, you're looking at $5,000. A 5, $14K, and a 6, $25K. Here's another one of Jackie Robinson. This time throwing the highest out there is a 5, and that sold for $10,000 in 2022. You definitely want the portrait over some other cards in that set. Mothers are still expensive, right? A 1 sold for 1.3K in 2019. A 4 is sold for 4.3K. All right, we're jumping into 1948 Bowman. Up first, we have Yogi Berra. Highest out there is a PSA 10. That sold for $192,000. To give you some other values, 1's about $350, 4 is $800, 7 is $3,000. These you can find at larger card shows. Another 48 Bowman is a Stan Musial. Highest out there is a 10. That sold for $360,000 in 2017. PSA 4, 1.4K, 8, $21K, and a 9, $51,000. Hall of Fame exhibits of Babe Ruth. The highest out there is a PSA 8. That sold for $700 in 2016. Other values, a 3 now is $780. A 6, $724 in 2020. So go back to that 8. If it sold today, it's at least a few $1,000s, if not more. 48 Cleveland Indians picture pack of Satchel Paige. The highest out there is a 5. That's sold in 2023 for 2.7K. A 3 is about $600. A 4 is $1,100. All right, 1948 Swell Sports of Jackie Robinson dramatic debut. I used to have one of these cards, sold it before, but actually graded it from roll. Highest out there is a PSA 7. The most expensive sale was a PSA 6 that sold for 9.3K. If you find a 2, it's about $4,000, which I think ours sold around 1948 of a Monty Irvin, and the highest out there is going to be a PSA A. A PSA A auto did sell for 4.8K back in 2019. And then another PSA A sold for 3K in 2018. Super, super tough card to find. Another card from the set is of the Mini Minozo. There's nothing graded. There's no other public sales. Probably pretty close to Monty Irvin. It's hard to say because I believe this is the first Irvin card where this is not the first Minozo card, but Minozo is probably a little bit more popular. So again, hard to say what it would do in this market, but it is a super tough item to find. Some Japanese cards now, which they were produced shortly after the war. Up first, we have a Babe Ruth from 1948. The highest grade is an SJC 5, but back in 2020, a 1 sold for $1,675. 1 today is about $1,300. We have a Hilton Smith from the Toleteros. The highest grade out there is a PSA 6, with that selling for $15,000 back in 2020. Some other values for you guys: a PSA 2 is about $3K, with a 5 selling for about $9,000. They don't come to auction that often. Willard Brown, also in that set. The highest out there is an SGC 9. No idea how that happened, but that sold for $24,000 back in 2022, which seems very cheap for what this market is today. Other values: SGC 3 is about 3.5K. Jumping into 1949 Leaf, we have Satchel Paige. The highest out there is an 8.5. An 8 sold for $432,000 back in 2018. Even at a 1, this card's about $22,000. A 4 is $47,000, and a 7 is about $100,000. Another one from 49 Leaf is Jackie Robinson. The highest out there is a 9. That 9 sold for $336,000 back in 2018. Other values: a 3 is $9,000, 4 is $12,000, 7 is $85,000. Leaf has a ton of short prints. They're very, very expensive. So you would have seen a lot more throughout this video based around Leaf if we didn't limit it to 2. But just to let you know on that side of things. Leaf premiums, a little bit different on this side of things. These are actually oversized. It's funny, these are labeled as 49s, but the Leaf cards are labeled as 48s. So it's the same year for both of them. It's a mess with the Leaf. But regardless, Babe Ruth has 3 different versions out there. Highest graded is a 4. 3 with the boxes, which is the one at the bottom, sold for $4,000. A 2 with black boxes sold for $2,700. Also have to feature the Lou Gehrig on the side of things. Highest out there is a 5. A 4 sold for $2,000 in 2022. Other values: a 1 and a 3, both sold for about $1,300. Ford and Bowman, we have of Jackie Robinson. Highest out there is a PSA 9. It sold for $432,000. There are some of these that are signed as well that occasionally hit up the auction houses. I believe they're $250,000 plus. Some other values of this card: a 3 is about 3.6K, 6 10K, and 8.5 about $170,000 back in 20. And just like Leaf, right, we have a Satchel Paige in here too. The highest graded is a 10, with the most expensive sale being a $216,000 back in 2023 for a 9. 10 would easily be a 7-figure card today. Other values: a 3 is about $4,000, a 5 is $5,000, 8 is about $30,000. 1949 Acebo of Ray Dandridge. The highest out there is going to be an SGC 4. Most expensive sale for that 4 is 2.5K back in 2021. An authentic is $635. All right, we have some 1949 50 Toleteros. This time we have Willard Brown, who has 2 different poses in the set. Highest graded is SGC 6. 1 this year sold for about $5,000. Historically, a 2.5 has sold for about $836 in 2015. A 3 sold for $2.5K in 2011. We also have Leon Day in the set. Highest graded is a 6. Most expensive sale with SGC 4 for $12.5K back in 2022. Some other values: a 1 about $6.3K, a 6 $4.3K back in 2022. We have a 1949 Lefty O Duel out of Japan. The highest graded was a raw sale for $595. He has the seals over there from the Pacific Coast League. 1949, another one of Babe Ruth. Most expensive sale was an 8 that sold for $1,000 in 2022. That is it for the 1940s video. Hope you guys found some value from it. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Up on the screen right now is a playlist of some of my other baseball videos like this. In there is going to be the 1950s video, and there's a lot of cards you probably aren't even aware of that sell for in the 5 figures, super scarce, and really, really cool issues in there. I will see you guys in that video.